The night I found out about her, my toddler was asleep beside me, clutching the phone his father never called on. There are moments in life when silence becomes so loud, it feels like a scream. That night it was raining. The kind of rain that doesn't cleanse. It lingers, heavy and accusing, tapping against the window like it knows your secrets. I sat on the couch, my hands curled around a cold cup of tea, staring at a name I didn't recognize glowing on my husband's laptop screen. I wasn't supposed to see it. I was just looking for a document he'd asked me to print earlier. But one wrong click opened his messages. Her name, Leah, 22, blinked at me like a cruel joke. Her profile picture showed a girl barely out of college, lips pursed in a careless smile, and there it was. The conversation thread, flirty emojis, wish you were here. A picture of his dinner, our dinner, captioned, thinking of you. My breath caught somewhere between disbelief and nausea. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there, staring at the screen, while the baby monitor hummed softly from the bedroom. My son's tiny breathing filled the space, steady, innocent. The only thing that kept me from falling apart. I remember whispering to myself, maybe it's harmless. Maybe he's just being friendly. But I knew better. That night, something in me went still. Before all this, before the lies and the loneliness, I used to think I'd married my best friend. Daniel and I met when we were both in grad school. He was charming in that quiet, unassuming way, always thoughtful, always listening. When he smiled, it was like the whole room softened a little. We got married young, maybe too young, and when our son, Noah, was born, I thought we'd made it through the hardest part. Sleepless nights, diaper blowouts, money stretched thin. We were a team. Or at least I believed we were. Daniel worked in IT, which meant late nights, endless projects, and a phone that never seemed to stop buzzing. I never questioned it. I told myself that's what good wives do. They trust. Our little apartment smelled of baby lotion and burnt coffee most days. The carpet always had some toy half buried in it, and there were sticky handprints on the fridge I could never quite clean off. But it was ours. On weekends, Daniel would lift Noah onto his shoulders and make airplane sounds until our boy laughed so hard he hiccuped. And I'd watch them, heart full, eyes soft, never imagining that one day he'd rather talk to a stranger through a glowing screen than to his own family. The first cracks appeared so quietly, I almost didn't notice. It started with small absences. He'd come home later than usual saying, "Just finishing something urgent." His phone was always face down on the table. His laughter changed too, quieter, secretive. Once, I walked into the living room and found him smiling at his laptop. When I asked what was funny, he quickly shut it and said, "Just a meme from work." It wasn't the words that bothered me. It was the tone, that careful, polite detachment, like he'd already built a wall between us and didn't want me to peek over it. Still, I told myself it was stress. He had deadlines. I had postpartum fatigue. We were just tired, not broken. But some nights, when Noah finally drifted to sleep, I'd sit by the window and wonder when Daniel stopped touching me like I was his home. There's this moment that sticks in my mind, a Tuesday night, months before I found out. I was cooking pasta while Noah played on the floor with a wooden spoon. Daniel came in late again, smelling faintly of cologne I didn't recognize. I said, "Dinner's almost ready." He barely looked up. "I already ate." Something about that, the way he said it, made the air go cold. He didn't notice me freeze mid-stir. Didn't notice Noah's giggles fade into quiet. He just walked past us into the bedroom, shutting the door softly like it was nothing. And I stood there, staring at the door, holding that stupid spoon like it could hold me back from breaking. That night, I slept facing the wall. His side of the bed stayed empty until dawn. When you're raising a toddler mostly alone, loneliness becomes your shadow. It sits beside you at breakfast, follows you into the grocery store, hums softly in the car when your baby falls asleep in the back seat. I learned to do everything by myself. Doctor visits, teething nights, first words. Daniel would ask about them later, half listening while scrolling on his phone. Once, I told him Noah had said his first full sentence, "Daddy, go work." He just smiled absently and said, "That's my boy." But I heard something else in that, something I didn't want to name yet. The day I found out about Leah was supposed to be ordinary. Daniel had left for a conference. I remember because Noah cried when he left, and Daniel promised, "Daddy will call tonight." He didn't. When I opened his laptop later to print a grocery coupon, I saw her name. At first, I thought it was spam. Then I saw her picture. Then the words, "I miss you. Wish I could sneak you into my room. Don't worry, she never checks my messages." That last line. That was the one that shattered everything. I felt my throat close up. My fingers trembled as I scrolled, each word slicing deeper. There were hundreds of messages, late-night chats, voice notes, even virtual date screenshots. My husband, the man I trusted with my child and my heart, was living a second life online with a 22-year-old woman who probably thought he was single. My tea went cold. My chest felt like it was caving in. For a long time, I just sat there staring at the screen, trying to remember how to breathe. Then, from the bedroom, Noah stirred, a small cry, calling for Mama. I closed the laptop, wiped my eyes, and I whispered to myself, "Not tonight. He doesn't get to take this night too." The next morning, I woke up to the faint sound of cartoons playing in the living room. Noah was sitting cross-legged on the rug, his cereal bowl tilted dangerously close to spilling. For a second, I almost forgot what I'd seen the night before. Then I looked at Daniel's empty side of the bed. The sheets were cold. His suitcase still gone, and the ache in my chest returned, quiet, heavy, deliberate. I went through the motions of the day like a machine. Dressed Noah, packed his snacks, forced a smile for the daycare staff even though my voice trembled when I said, "See you soon." Then I sat in the car, engine running, and stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked fine, too fine, like a woman pretending not to be falling apart. When Daniel finally came home 2 days later, I was sitting on the couch with Noah asleep against my lap. He looked exhausted, or maybe just guilty. He set his bag down gently and said, "Hey, long trip." I wanted to ask him where he'd really been. I wanted to scream, "Who is Leah?" But instead I said, "Did you call Noah like you promised?" He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. I tried. Bad signal. That was the first lie I could hear. The sound of it, too rehearsed, too easy. I nodded slowly, stroking Noah's hair, pretending to believe him. Inside, my heart was already folding into itself, protecting something fragile I couldn't name yet. For the next week, I watched him, quietly, the way his fingers twitched toward his phone every time it buzzed. How he smiled faintly at messages, then cleared the screen when I got too close. He'd started wearing cologne again, the same one I'd smelled that Tuesday night. And once, while folding laundry, I found a receipt in his jeans pocket. It was from a coffee shop downtown, 2 lattes, 1 slice of cheesecake. The date matched the day he said he'd been working late. I held that small slip of paper like it was a confession. When he came home that night, I asked, "Did you get to eat at work?" He said, "Just vending machine snacks." Another lie. I smiled even as my stomach turned. Because now I knew. But knowing and confronting are 2 different kinds of pain. Knowing is quiet. It sits in your bones, cold and constant. Confronting burns, and I wasn't ready to burn. Not yet, so I did what women like me are taught to do. I endured. I kept the home running. I packed lunches, ironed his shirts, pretended everything was fine. Except sometimes at night, when Noah was asleep, I'd unlock his laptop again. Not to torture myself, at least that's what I told myself, but to understand. To see who this Leah was. Her messages were like a window into a world I no longer belonged to. She sent him memes, selfies from her office desk, notes about how cute his voice sounded on calls. She wrote things like, "I can't wait for us to take that trip." Trip? My hands shook as I scrolled. He'd promised me we'd go on a family vacation that summer, said we needed a break. But his messages told another story. There were bookings, hotel confirmations, 2 names. One was his, the other hers. That's when my tears finally came. Hot, sharp, unstoppable. I covered my mouth, terrified of waking Noah. The pain wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation. The man I'd shared a home, a child, and dreams with was sharing his new life with a girl who still posted photos with her sorority friends. I didn't confront him that night. I just sat there whispering to the walls, why wasn't I enough? The silence had no answer, but the next morning, something inside me shifted. I woke up early, dressed Noah for daycare, and sent Daniel a text. Please be home by 7. We need to talk. No emojis. No anger. Just 7 words that even he couldn't misread. All day, I went through my chores with trembling hands. The clock seemed to mock me. Every minute stretched thin with dread. When the front door finally clicked open that evening, the smell of his cologne filled the apartment before his footsteps did. He saw me sitting at the table, laptop open. Hey, he said, cautious. You okay? I gestured to the screen. You tell me. His eyes darted to the messages. His body froze. Then he whispered, You went through my stuff? That was it. That was his first reaction. Not guilt, not apology, just accusation. I stared at him, voice shaking. I was looking for the truth, and I found it. He opened his mouth, probably to lie again, but I cut him off. Leah, the 22-year-old colleague, the one you're taking to Chicago next month. Should I go ahead and cancel our family trip now? The color drained from his face. He stammered. It's not what you think. I laughed. It came out bitter, dry. Daniel, there are pictures, messages. You told her I don't get you anymore. He looked away, his jaw tight. I didn't mean it. It just happened. That phrase, it just happened, was the final crack. As if betrayal were a storm he accidentally walked into, instead of a choice he made every night he hit send. I stood up slowly. My legs felt weak, but my voice didn't. I stayed up with your son through every fever, every nightmare. I held this family together while you built a fantasy with a girl half your age. Don't tell me it just happened? He didn't respond. Just sat there silent, staring at the floor. After a long pause, I said quietly, You need to leave. For a second, he looked shocked, like he thought I'd forgive him. Again. But I didn't. Because somewhere between the lies and the loneliness, I had already learned how to live without him. He packed a bag in silence. When he walked to the door, he turned once, as if expecting me to stop him. I didn't. The door shut softly, but the echo of it stayed for days. That night, when Noah woke up crying, I went to him and held him close. He smelled like baby shampoo and warmth. His tiny hand clutched my shirt as if to remind me. There was still something pure left in my life. As I rocked him back to sleep, I whispered into his hair. It's just you and me now, sweetheart. And we're going to be okay? The morning after Daniel left, the apartment felt different. Not quieter, just emptier. It was like all the air in the rooms had been rearranged, and I could finally hear the small sounds I'd been ignoring for years. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the kitchen clock, the faint shuffle of Noah's feet as he dragged his blanket down the hall. He toddled toward me, hair sticking up in every direction, his voice still sleepy. Daddy gone? That question. It sliced through me. I knelt and kissed his forehead. Daddy's staying somewhere else for a while, baby. He blinked, thinking hard, then nodded like it made perfect sense. Okay, pancakes? I smiled, a weak, trembling smile, and said, Yeah, pancakes. And just like that, life went on. Not gracefully, not smoothly, but somehow, forward. For a few weeks, I existed in survival mode. Wake up, feed Noah, go to work, avoid questions, come home. Pretend I wasn't unraveling. But grief is a strange thing. It doesn't always show up as tears. Sometimes it looks like checking your phone at 2 a.m., half hoping for an apology that never comes. Sometimes it's scrolling through old photos of vacations where you now realize he wasn't really there, even when he was standing beside you. And sometimes it's silence. A thick, unbearable silence that no amount of noise can fill. 3 weeks after he left, Daniel called. I let it ring twice before answering. His voice was low, measured, cautious, the way people talk to someone they've wronged but still want something from. "How's Noah?" he asked. "He's fine," I said. "He misses you." A pause. Then, "I want to see him." "You can," I said. "But not here." He sighed, frustrated. "Come on, I just want to talk." "No," I said firmly. "You don't get to come back here and play family. Not after what you did." Another silence. Then he whispered, almost defensively, "Leah and it's over." I let that hang there, feeling nothing. Not relief, not vindication, just emptiness. Because even if it was over, the damage was done. He'd already handed my trust to someone else, and there's no undo button for that. "Good," I said finally. "Maybe now you can sit with what you threw away." He didn't respond. I could almost hear his guilt through the static. Then I hung up. That night I took out my laptop, the same one that once showed me everything I didn't want to know, and opened a blank document. For the first time since the separation, I started writing. Not to him, not about him. But for myself, I wrote about the mornings I carried Noah on my hip while answering work emails. The nights I cried in the shower so he wouldn't hear. The quiet strength it takes to cook dinner for 2 when you used to cook for 3. It wasn't perfect writing, but it was mine. And slowly, it began to stitch the parts of me that his betrayal had torn open. One morning, as I was dropping Noah at daycare, one of the teachers, Miss Jenna, smiled softly and said, "He's been talking a lot about golf lately. Says Daddy plays golf with someone named Leah." The word hit me like a stone to the chest. Leah, of course. Even after all this time, she lingered, not just in his messages, but in the small, unintentional ways Noah absorbed what he heard. I forced a smile. He's got a good memory. Then, when I got back to the car, I just sat there. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something deeper. Sadness, maybe. Pity. Because now I could see how fragile Daniel's world was. A man so desperate for validation that he risked everything real for something temporary. And here I was, rebuilding what he broke. Brick by brick. A week later, I was at the grocery store when I saw her. Leah. She was standing by the produce section, wearing a pale blue blouse and holding her phone like it was part of her. Her hair was tied up and she looked young. So painfully young. For a moment I froze. I had imagined this meeting 100 different ways. In some versions, I confronted her. In others, I ignored her, but what actually happened surprised even me. She noticed me first. Her eyes widened, recognition flickering in them like a guilty spark. She whispered, "You're Daniel's wife." "Ex-wife," I corrected gently. She swallowed hard, guilt washing over her face. "I didn't know he was still—" I cut her off. "Yes, you did." Her lip trembled. "I thought he said you two were separated." I exhaled slowly, steadying my voice. "Leah, you're 22. You believed what you wanted to believe. I'm not here to fight you." She looked stunned. "You're not?" "No," I said softly. "I've wasted enough of my life on lies. I just hope someday when you love someone you remember this. What it feels like to be on the other side of someone's selfishness." She nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. And just like that, I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. That night, I told my sister Amy about what happened. She gasped. "You actually talked to her?" "You should have told her off." I smiled faintly. "Why?" She already looked like someone who'd learned her lesson. "I didn't need to say more." Amy shook her head. "You're stronger than me." "Not stronger," I said quietly. "Just done." 2 days later, Daniel showed up at my door. He looked worn out, dark circles unshaven, shoulders slumped. "I heard you ran into Leah," he said. I nodded. "I did." He ran a hand through his hair. "She told me. Said you were kind." I didn't reply. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "I messed up. I know that. I want to make things right." I studied him carefully. "You can start by being a good father to Noah. That's all I expect from you now." His eyes glistened. "You really don't hate me?" I took a deep breath. "No, Daniel. I don't hate you, but I don't love you anymore either." He nodded, tears brimming. "I deserve that." I stepped back, letting him see Noah playing on the floor behind me. "Go ahead," I said quietly. "He's waiting for you." And as Daniel knelt to hug his son, I turned away, not out of bitterness, but peace. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't anger. It's healing. When I finally gathered enough courage to confront Mark, it wasn't out of anger. It was out of exhaustion. Exhaustion from pretending. From lying to myself that things were fine. From standing in a kitchen that no longer smelled like home. That Friday, I waited for him to come home. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the wall clock and the soft static hum from the baby monitor. Mia was asleep upstairs, her tiny breath slow and rhythmic, like a small heartbeat against the silence. When Mark finally walked in, it was almost 10 p.m. He looked tired, but not the kind of tired that came from work. It was the kind that came from living two lives. He loosened his tie, gave a faint smile, and said, "Hey, babe, you're up late." I was sitting on the couch, laptop open in front of me. The messages were still on the screen. I didn't turn it toward him yet. I just looked at him, really looked. His shirt was slightly wrinkled, and his wedding ring gleamed under the living room lamp. How could something so small, a simple gold band, carry so much weight, and yet mean so little now? "Mark," I said quietly, "who is Emma?" He froze. For a brief moment, he didn't even blink. Then he laughed. That soft, dismissive laugh people use when they're trying to act like something isn't serious. "What? Emma? You mean Emma from work?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, Emma from work. The 22-year-old you've been chatting with until 2 a.m. every night. The one who calls you Marky and sends you selfies while you're sitting in the living room pretending to do paperwork." His jaw tightened. The color drained from his face. He tried to speak, but no sound came out at first. Then he muttered, "It's not what you think." I almost laughed. "It's not what you think." "The oldest, emptiest line in the world? Then tell me," I said. My voice didn't rise, but it shook. "Tell me what it is, Mark. Because I've seen the messages. I've seen the photos. You telling her she makes you feel young again. You telling her I don't understand you anymore. You telling her she's the only one who listens." He rubbed his face with both hands and exhaled sharply. "You don't get it, Sarah. I've been lonely. You're always busy with Mia. You barely even look at me anymore. Everything's about schedules and diapers and meals. I just wanted someone to talk to." That's when something inside me broke. Not loudly, but quietly, like glass cracking under slow pressure. I was busy raising our child. "Mark, while you were busy chasing a fantasy, you had someone to talk to. You had me." He shook his head, frustrated. "No, it wasn't like that. It wasn't physical. We just don't," I said sharply. "Don't you dare say it wasn't cheating because it wasn't physical. You built a world with her behind my back. You gave her the parts of you that used to belong to me." The silence that followed was unbearable. The refrigerator hummed softly. Outside, a car passed, headlights flashing briefly through the blinds. I stood up slowly. My legs trembled, but I forced myself to stay upright. I won't scream. I won't throw things. I just need you to leave tonight. Go stay with your brother. I can't have you here. He stared at me, shocked, maybe realizing that for once I wasn't begging or breaking down. "You're overreacting," he said, voice low. "It was just online. Nothing happened." I closed my laptop, the screen going black. "Something did happen, Mark," I said. "You stopped being my husband the moment you started being hers." He looked at me one last time, then turned away. The sound of the door closing behind him was softer than I expected, but it echoed in my chest like thunder. That night, after he left, I sat in the dark living room and stared at the empty couch where he used to sit with Mia in his lap. I replayed every message I'd read, every lie I'd believed. And the strange thing was, I didn't cry. Maybe the tears were too tired to come. In the weeks that followed, I did what women like me have always done. I survived in silence. I woke up, made breakfast, packed Mia's tiny bag for daycare, went to work, came home, fed her, bathed her, and collapsed into bed. Mark tried calling. He texted sometimes, apologies mixed with excuses, but I never replied. Then one morning I received an email from someone I didn't know. The subject line read, "You don't know me, but you deserve to know the truth." My hands went cold. I opened it. It was Emma. She wrote, "I'm sorry. I didn't know he was married when it started. He told me you were separated. I found out the truth only after seeing a picture of your baby on his Facebook. I ended things last week. I thought you should know." Attached was a screenshot, Mark begging her to take him back. He'd written, "She doesn't get me like you do. You're the only one who makes me feel alive." That was the day my heartbreak turned into something else. Something colder, stronger, resolve. If he could betray me so easily, I could rebuild without him just as easily, and I did. A few months later, I filed for divorce. When he showed up to sign the papers, he looked thinner, like the life he'd built on lies had finally caught up with him. "I didn't think you'd actually go through with it," he said quietly. I looked him in the eye and replied, "Neither did I. But then I remembered who I used to be. Before you made me forget, he didn't say another word. That was the last time I saw Mark as my husband." I thought the hardest part of leaving would be the silence. But it wasn't. It was the noise that followed. The whispers at daycare pickup. Other moms trying not to stare, trying to ask softly if everything was all right. The cautious phone calls from my mother, her voice trembling somewhere between worry and "I told you so." And worst of all, the loneliness of explaining the same story to myself every night. Why I stayed as long as I did. Why I left when I finally did. At first, I tried to disappear into routine. I threw myself into work, into motherhood, into anything that would fill the hours Mark used to occupy. Mia was too young to understand what was happening, but sometimes when she toddled to the door at 6 p.m. saying, "Dada?" in her tiny voice, something inside me shattered again. I'd kneel down, kiss her forehead, and whisper, "Dada's not here tonight, baby. But Mama's right here," and she'd smile, as if that was enough. Maybe it was. Maybe, for both of us, it had to be. One evening, I sat at my desk sorting through bills when I saw a notification pop up on my laptop. An email from Mark. The subject line read, "Please just hear me out." My first instinct was to delete it. But curiosity, that dangerous, familiar emotion, made me click. He wrote, "Sarah, I made a mistake. I miss you and Mia. Emma was never real. She was just a distraction. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Please, can we meet and talk?" My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I almost typed something. A single line, maybe. "You should have thought about that before you broke us." But I didn't. Instead, I closed the laptop, stood up, and walked into Mia's room. She was asleep, her small chest rising and falling, clutching her stuffed bunny. And I realized that no apology could undo what he'd done. I didn't need closure. I needed peace. That weekend, I drove out to the old trail we used to hike together, Mark and I. It was early morning. Dew clung to the grass, and the air smelled faintly of pine and wet earth. For years, that trail had felt like ours. The place where we first said, "I love you," where he'd proposed, where we'd dreamed up a life that never quite became real. This time, I walked it alone. Every step felt like reclaiming something, not just the memory, but my space in it. Halfway through, I stopped at a bench overlooking the valley. The sun was rising, pale gold light washing over everything. I sat down and whispered, "You don't get to have this anymore, Mark. You don't get to haunt the good places." It wasn't anger. It was release. A few weeks later, I received a call from HR at Mark's company. They wanted to verify some details. Apparently, Emma had filed a formal complaint. The words harassment and Inappropriate conduct came up. I felt a chill run through me. The man who once prided himself on being the professional one who had spent years lecturing me about career integrity was now facing a public scandal because of the same mistake that broke our home. I didn't take pleasure in it, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a grim sense of justice. It was as if life had decided to finish the conversation I'd walked away from. After the divorce papers were finalized, I made small changes. Little symbolic things. I painted the living room a lighter color, sold the couch we used to fight on, replaced the framed wedding photo in the hallway with a picture of Mia and me at the beach, wind in our hair, laughing. Each change felt like a quiet declaration. I'm still here. People often talk about starting over like it's one big, brave moment. But for me, it was 1,000 tiny moments stitched together, making coffee without crying, folding his old t-shirts into donation boxes, sleeping on one side of the bed and realizing for the first time it didn't feel empty anymore. One evening, about 3 months later, I got a message on Facebook. It was from Emma again. I wanted to thank you, she wrote. You don't know me, but your strength helped me see who he really was. I've started therapy. I'm sorry for my part in all this. I sat there rereading her message. The younger me, the hurt, bitter me, would have deleted it in anger. But now I just felt human. I typed back, "Thank you, Emma. We all make mistakes. I hope you heal too." And as I hit send, something lifted off me. Forgiveness, not for him, not even for her, but for myself. For the woman who stayed too long, for the mother who thought she was failing, for the person who finally chose herself. That night, I tucked Mia into bed, turned off the light, and sat by the window with a cup of tea. The house was quiet again, but this time it wasn't heavy. Silence, I realized, could be soft, peaceful, a sign that a storm had passed, and the air was clear again. I thought of Mark, wherever he was, probably trying to rebuild what he'd broken. I didn't wish him harm anymore. I just wished him the awareness to never destroy someone else the way he destroyed me. Because that's what growth really is. Not revenge, but release. It started as a whisper in our small town, the kind that travels faster than truth itself. By the time it reached me, it wasn't a whisper anymore. It was news. Mark's company had launched an internal investigation. Apparently, Emma wasn't the only one he'd been crossing boundaries with. Emails, messages, late-night mentoring sessions. His charm had stretched further than I ever realized. When my neighbor Linda mentioned it casually over the fence, I felt my stomach twist. Not because I wanted to know more, but because I finally understood what kind of man I'd been defending all those years. Still, I kept quiet. I didn't add to the gossip. I'd spent too long trying to clean up the mess of his choices. I wasn't about to join the chorus. The first time I saw him after the scandal broke was at the grocery store. He looked thinner, older, the kind of tired that seeps into your bones. His once crisp shirt was wrinkled, his tie hanging loose around his neck. He saw me before I could turn away. "Sarah," he said softly, his voice cracking like old wood. I didn't stop walking, but I did turn my head slightly, just enough to meet his eyes. There was guilt there, and maybe for the first time, recognition. "I never meant for any of this," he murmured. I paused, my hand still on the handle of the shopping cart. "I know," I said. "That's the problem, Mark. You never meant for anything. You just let things happen." And with that, I turned down the next aisle. It was the calmest goodbye I'd ever given. A few weeks later, an article appeared online, a short piece in a local business paper. "Regional manager resigns amid investigation," it read. No names mentioned, but everyone knew. The comment section buzzed with speculation. Some people defended him. Some condemned him. I didn't read all of it, just enough to see how quickly people can turn from praise to pity. But one line stuck with me. Sometimes, the higher you climb, the lonelier it gets. That was Mark, always reaching, never realizing he was standing on the people who held him up. Meanwhile, my own life, quiet, simple, began to bloom again. I got a small promotion at work, nothing dramatic, just a recognition that I'd been showing up, doing the work, even when my heart was somewhere else. My boss, Elaine, stopped by my desk one afternoon and said, "You've been through a lot, Sarah. I just wanted you to know. We all noticed how strong you've been. It was such a small thing, but it made me tear up right there in front of her. Strength, I realized, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just whispers, 'Keep going,' when no one else can hear." Then came the moment I didn't expect. Mark's mother called. We hadn't spoken since the divorce. When her name appeared on my phone, I hesitated before answering. "Hello?" I said cautiously. Her voice was shaky. "Sarah, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. You were always good to him. Better than he deserved." I didn't know what to say. There was a long silence, broken only by her soft sobs. "He's lost so much," she said finally. "And I know it's his own doing. I just wanted to thank you for not turning Mia against him." That one hit me hard, because no matter what Mark had done, I'd never let Mia hear a bad word about her father. She would form her own truth someday, but it wouldn't come from bitterness. "I appreciate that," I told her gently. "I just want her to have peace. That's all." There was another pause. Then she whispered, "You've always had grace. Sarah, don't ever lose it." When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring at my reflection in the dark window. For the first time, I realized people could finally see me for who I'd always been, not the woman Mark left, but the woman who stayed strong. A month later, Mark showed up at Mia's birthday party. He stood at the edge of the yard, clutching a small box wrapped in shiny paper. I could tell he wasn't sure if he should be there. Mia saw him first. "Daddy!" she squealed, running toward him. He picked her up and hugged her tight, his face buried in her hair. I watched from the porch, a mixture of sadness and acceptance washing over me. When he approached, he spoke softly. "Thank you for letting me come." "This is her day," I replied. "That's what matters." We didn't talk much after that. He helped her blow out candles, took a few photos, and then slipped away before the evening ended. But before he left, he turned to me and said, "You're doing a good job, Sarah. She's happy." "I can see that," I nodded. "She deserves happiness," I said quietly. Then, after a beat, "We both do." That night, as I cleaned up the kitchen, I found the small gift he'd brought, a simple music box with a ballerina that twirled when you wound it up. It wasn't fancy, but Mia loved it instantly. When she finally fell asleep, I wound it once more and listened to the soft tune filling the room. It reminded me of our old life, not the pain but the small, innocent moments before everything broke, and for the first time, I could remember without hurting. Mark had lost his career, his reputation, and most of the life he built. But in losing him, I'd found something steadier, something he never had. Peace. Sometimes, justice doesn't arrive with noise or applause. Sometimes, it just comes quietly, in the form of a life rebuilt, a child's laughter, and a woman finally breathing freely again. And that, I realized, was enough. Peace didn't arrive all at once. It came in fragments, the quiet mornings when I could drink my coffee without anxiety, the soft hum of the washing machine on Sunday afternoons, the moments when Mia's laughter filled the house instead of my own thoughts. For years, my world had revolved around survival, getting through each day, each night, each doubt. But now, I started to notice the in-between spaces, the stillness, the parts of life that weren't loud or dramatic but simply mine. After the divorce, I'd promised myself one thing: I wouldn't let bitterness define me. At first, it was just words, something I repeated so I wouldn't fall apart. But slowly, I began to live by it. There were small steps: learning how to fix the leaky faucet myself, repainting Mia's bedroom pink because she said it felt like cotton candy, and cooking dinner not out of duty, but because it made the house smell like home again. Each change, each new routine, stitched me back together in ways Mark's absence couldn't undo. One evening, after Mia went to bed, I found myself sitting at the dining table with my laptop open. For months, I'd been considering taking a course, something online, part-time, just for me. Not for my career, not for anyone else's expectations. So I clicked enroll. It was a creative writing class. I didn't know where it would lead, but it felt right. The first assignment asked, "Write about a moment that changed you." I stared at the blinking cursor for a long time before typing the words. My ex-husband fell in love with someone online, and I learned how to love myself again. That was the moment I realized healing wasn't just about forgetting. It was about finding meaning in the pain. Some nights I'd sit on the porch after Mia fell asleep, watching the moonlight settle over the yard. There was something deeply comforting about that quiet. I'd think about the woman I used to be, anxious, exhausted, desperate to hold on, and the woman I was becoming. I no longer needed anyone's apology to feel free. Mark's mistakes weren't my burden anymore. A few months later, I got a call from my sister, Rachel. She said, "You sound different lately, happier." I laughed. "Do I?" "Yeah," she said. "It's like you finally stopped waiting for him to fix what he broke." Her words lingered. Maybe because she was right. For so long, I'd been holding my breath, waiting for Mark to see me, to regret, to return something I lost. But I didn't need any of that anymore. I was already whole. Mia was growing fast. She'd started asking more questions about her dad. Not the painful kind, just the curious kind. "Why don't we all live together? Did you love him?" And I always answered her truthfully but gently. "Yes, I loved him, and we both love you. That's what matters most. Because love, no matter how it ends, leaves lessons behind. And I wanted her to learn that. That love can be both real and flawed, and still worth remembering for the good it gave." Then one spring afternoon, I ran into Emma. It was completely by accident, a small cafe downtown. She looked different, more grown, quieter somehow. When she saw me, her face turned pale, and for a moment, I thought she might leave. But instead, she walked up to me and said softly, "Sarah, can I talk to you for a second?" I nodded, unsure where this would go. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she said, eyes glistening. "I was stupid and selfish, and I didn't realize how much damage I was part of." Her voice trembled, and for a second, I saw not the woman who'd helped destroy my marriage, but a young woman who'd made a mistake and carried it heavily. I took a slow breath. "Thank you," I said quietly. "It doesn't change what happened, but I appreciate you saying that." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheek. Before she left, she said, "You didn't deserve any of it." I didn't cry after she left. Instead, I felt lighter, like I'd been carrying something invisible, and someone had finally lifted it off. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't about letting someone else off the hook. It's about untying yourself from their mistakes. And that day, I untied the last knot. That summer, I finished my writing course. My final project was a short story about a woman who rebuilt her life after betrayal. When my instructor left a comment that said, "This felt real, raw, and hopeful," I smiled to myself, because it was real. Every word was a piece of my truth. I started posting small pieces online. Nothing dramatic, just short reflections about resilience and healing. To my surprise, people responded. Messages poured in, strangers saying, "I'm going through this right now," or, "Thank you. I needed to hear this." And for the first time, my pain had purpose. Months later, Mark called again, this time not for favors or updates. Just to say, "I'm getting help, Sarah. Therapy. I wanted you to know." There was no anger in his voice. No excuses, just quiet honesty. "I'm glad," I said softly. "For your sake and for hers." He paused, then asked, "Do you think we'll ever be friends again?" I thought for a long moment. "Maybe someday," I said. "But I think right now we're both where we need to be." He didn't argue. "Take care of yourself," he said, You too, Mark. When the call ended, I looked out the window and smiled. Not because I missed him, but because finally, I didn't. That night, Mia and I baked cookies together. Flour everywhere, laughter echoing off the kitchen walls. When she hugged me and said, "You're the best, Mommy," I felt something inside me settle. A quiet, steady kind of joy. This was my happy ending. Not a perfect family, not a grand reconciliation. Just peace, the kind you build with your own two hands. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and Mia's soft breathing fills the hallway, I catch myself thinking about the woman I used to be, the one who waited by the phone, who checked messages for hidden meanings, who thought love meant patience, even when that patience was breaking her heart. I think about how much of myself I lost trying to be enough for someone who had already left me emotionally. And I think about how somehow through all that loss, I found me. There's a certain peace that comes when you stop needing someone else's apology to heal. When you stop measuring your worth through someone else's choices, that's when real freedom begins, quiet, slow, and honest. I used to think my story ended the day Mark left. That I was the woman he betrayed, the one left behind to raise a child and carry the pieces. But now, I see it differently. That day wasn't my ending. It was the beginning of my becoming. When I look at Mia now, her laughter, her kindness, the way she believes in love despite everything she's seen, I realize I didn't just survive that chapter. I rewrote it. And maybe that's the point of every heartbreak, to remind us that even when people fail us, life still holds second chances, in quieter, gentler forms. If you're watching this and you've ever been where I was, betrayed, abandoned, left questioning your own worth, I want you to know something. You are not defined by what someone else did to you. You are defined by how you rise from it. Don't let their betrayal become your identity. Let it become your story of becoming stronger, wiser, softer, and free. Because healing isn't loud. It doesn't need an audience. It happens in the small, ordinary moments. The morning coffee, the sound of your child's laughter, the first time you realize you haven't cried in weeks. That's when you know. You've come home to yourself. Mark may always be part of my past, but I no longer carry him into my future. And as for Emma, I hope she learns what I did, that love built on deception can never give peace. But I don't wish them harm, just distance, and maybe one day understanding, because forgiveness in the end wasn't for them, it was for me. My name is Sarah, and this was my story of heartbreak, betrayal, and the slow, beautiful work of starting over. Now I want to ask you something. If someone betrayed you the way Mark did, would you forgive them? Or would you let them live with the weight of their choices? Tell me in the comments. And if my story touched you, don't forget to subscribe. Because sometimes healing begins when we share our stories.